Here we are, folks, 1 week away from Carmageddon in the Lower Mainland. It is the BC Poly Hot Stove over here in Metrotown, which just happens to be above a major bus hub here in the Lower Mainland. I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association. You might know us better as the Turkeys from ICBA, joined as always by...
That's going to take me a minute to recover from. I'm Maclean K. I am the editor-in-chief of the Orca, where, for now, transit is working over here in lovely Victoria.
Quit bragging! Quit bragging!
That is the news of the day. Well, I mean, it could be worse. Your council could be asking for a 50% pay hike. Yeah. So you never.
Oh, yeah, we should talk about that at the end because I want to feel part of me. I would like to rant on the idiocy that is Ben. Is it? Anyways. I feel like that could be a standing topic, though, on this show.
Yeah, that's good. An evergreen topic.
Yeah, you know how Unspun always talks about that same park in Vancouver over and over and over and over and over again, and it's making George matter. Ben is that to us.
There you go.
He could be that.
We need to have a drinking segment.
That's right.
First, the news of the day. Jordan, where you are in the Lower Mainland, thousands of people next week are going to have a really bad week.
Yeah, it is not going to be good. So Unifor just announcing moments ago that they've been going through some, overtime bans and whatnot as they try to negotiate a new contract on behalf of their bus drivers and mechanics. That's been inconvenient, but it's been kind of localized. A few C-bus sailings canceled, the odd bus not showing up, but nothing widespread. 1 week from today, though, they say that will all change. They have scheduled November 27th, 28th, and 29th as full bus system shutdown days. They are going to walk out, go on strike. There will be no buses in the Lower Mainland on the 27th, 28th, and 29th. And you got to hand it to Unifor. They're not pulling any punches with their NDP buddies in Victoria. They have scheduled this for a week where session is on, where there will be at least 2 question periods during that time. Mm-hmm. They have scheduled it. They've given a week's notice, so this will be a growing story as negotiations will be they'll be under the microscope here for the next week. And then if nothing happens, which right now they seem miles and miles apart, bus shutdown on the 27th, 28th, and 29th, and possibly, C-Bus is included in that, and possibly a SkyTrain shutdown as well, as QP, who represents SkyTrain workers, are also voting on job action. And if you were QP and Unifor, you'd kind of want to go out together. So this could be even worse on Wednesday the 27th.
And for those of you who drive to work in the Lower Mainland, you're not going to escape unscathed, because a lot of people who now choose to take transit because it's easier, or it's easier to find parking, or not to find parking rather, they're not going to have any other options. So the roads are going to be chaos as well.
Uber and Lyft, they'll be our options. Aren't they running? Aren't they operating?
We were assured they would be running by this time.
John Horgan told me they'd be up any day, right? So where are those? Oh, so maybe I should learn Chinese so I can use one of the illegal services. Would that help? No, listen, this is really bad. This is bad for the region. This is bad for TransLink. This is bad for every single mayor sitting on the TransLink board. And it's bad for the NDP. But Maclean, you told me just before we went on the air that Harry Bains, Labour Minister, has weighed in. I'm sure he has got something that's going to put us all at ease. What is he saying?
He urges both sides to get back to the negotiating table. And then in the next paragraph talks about the millions being invested in transit. There's not a lot. There's not a lot of immediate help coming from the provincial government. Hey, here's the thing. I hope that this is a negotiating tactic. I hope that this is a threat, and that a week from now we're kind of laughing that this happened. But man, it doesn't look good right now, does it?
No, it doesn't look good right now. And so, we need to kind of recap. So back in 2000 was the last full bus shutdown in the Lower Mainland. So this was actually, ironically, pre the 16 years of BC Liberal government. The last time there was a bus shutdown was also an NDP government, which, infer what you will there. But 16 years ago, or 20 years ago now, very different kind of usages of transit. I mean, the transit has always been well used in the Lower Mainland, but certainly not to the extent it is now, and certainly not in the what I would call NDP faithful ridings. Adrian Dix is riding, Dave Eby's riding. These are key cabinet ministers who are going to be under a ton of pressure here because their folks have moved into these condos and gotten rid of their cars because, transit is safe and reliable and cheap and all that sort of thing. That's not going to exist anymore. Now, the irony is there hasn't been a bus strike for 20 years, in part because that generation of bus drivers swore they would never do it again because traffic actually slightly improved, especially in the downtown core, because you didn't have buses slowing everything down. Not sure that'll be the case this time. But that held them at bay basically for 20 years. So how poor of an offer has TransLink made that they are finally ready to try this experience again as bus drivers? It's pretty surprising, and it's gonna be rough. The funny thing is, so every Friday at ICBA, I send out a little email to our staff, with some like news bites from ICBA land and then some announcements and reminders. Last week I sent one out saying, hey, bus strikes are escalating. If transit's an issue, please talk to our office manager. We can make other arrangements. Maybe we can do some van pool, carpooling. So obviously that's going to be heightened now on the 22nd. But one of the things I had on my list for this week is the 29th, Friday, is Black Friday in the United States. Huge shopping day, even here at Metrotown. I can tell you, Maclean, last year, Black Friday, trying to get out of the parkade was a disaster. It took, it took one of us 25 minutes to get out of the parkade one day.
I believe you.
I was going to kind of suggest, like, Black Friday, maybe do something else or whatever, but that doesn't seem like it's going to be an option. So,
Black Friday indeed.
Yeah.
And it's hard to imagine a job action or a strike that would more disproportionately affect lower income people than a transit strike. I mean, a school strike is kind of across the board, and something like an air traffic controller strike that but transit is sort of overwhelmingly people either they're just starting out or lower income. This is a tough one to swallow.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the same time, you have EB hiking the rates on ICBC. So, young drivers, dying with like $5,000 car insurance bills. Now their bus passes are no good. This is bad news. How much abuse do you think, like, who's going to take the blame for this next weekend if it happens? Is it going to be the mayors? Is it going to be the NDP government? Is it going to be the drivers? Is it going to be pox in all your houses?
I think it'll be the last one. I think it'll be a pox on all your houses. Because there does seem to be some sympathy with the bus drivers in that, with some of the demands they've been making about things like bathroom breaks.
Yeah.
I think people can relate to that.
Yeah.
And these are not unreasonable demands they're making. But
did you see the one picture on Twitter? I forget where it was, but of a bus driver's bathroom or like a rest area, and it's a toilet right next to a microwave, right? Like, yuck.
Yeah.
Like that seems to me to be a very fair work demand, right? Like, that should be better.
So this is obviously a complicated situation, but with that said, I mean, there doesn't seem to be movement on either side, and the longer it goes on and the more disruption people face, the more angry they're going to get, and where they direct that anger, I think it'll be sort of a scattershot approach. The NDP government will not emerge unscathed, put it that way.
Yeah, and to Unifor's credit, they've given a week for some talks to happen. They've also backed this up so that they're not running into Christmas, which of course, fewer people go to work, so they, maybe usage goes down. So they are trying their best to maximize the disruption. If they don't get a deal next week, we'll stretch into the first week of December. I think most of us would think it would, maybe the second week. But eventually, someone's going to blink here. At one point, was it Horgan or someone who was kind of hinting like, take some capital dollars and spread it to this, and maybe if we had one less SkyTrain stop in Surrey's extension, we could afford. Like, that to me is not a great solution either. So.
That's true. We'll see.
Yeah.
As I say, I hope this is a negotiation tactic. And next week we're talking about something else, the near miss. But I'm happy to be in Victoria this week.
Well, now Saanich students are back after a 3-week strike by their QP.
That's right.
But the interesting thing about that is, it's sort of like what we have here. They have an employer, but that employer is a creature of the provincial government. And Rob Fleming took a lot of criticism from Adam Olsen, actually, in the House. So I do wonder, like, question period today will be kind of interesting to see if the Liberals try to pounce on this, what they can say. This is a topic where they actually have clean hands because they never had a bus driver strike in 16 years. So for the whataboutistes out there, like Marcella Bernardo of News 1130, who I had a little Twitter discussion with today, whataboutism doesn't work here because they have a record of 16 years of labor peace with the Translate Union.
Well, I mean, and the NDP answers will be, I mean, I could write them for them now. They're still working today. There's a week. We urge both sides to get back to the negotiating tables. I'm sure the opposition joins with us in hoping that we can reach a settlement, et cetera, and so forth. I mean, they're not going to, the NDP, I assume, are smart enough to hold firm on that kind of thing now and not get into whataboutism, but I have been disappointed before.
Fun fact, the president of TransLink received about $100,000 a year raise last year. His best offer to the bus drivers is $222
each. Ouch.
So that does not go over well, and that's why you shouldn't overpay your transit executives, people. Yep. Certainly shouldn't be paying the transit executive more than the head of New York or Chicago or LA transit. You cannot find a transit system in North America that pays their president more than TransLink pays, and that is pretty disgusting. So there you go.
As disgusting as not having a clean or safe place to pee. Exactly.
Or having a microwave next to the toilet. All right. Let's talk federal cabinet.
Yes.
Here we go. Maclean, yeah, go ahead. What's your takeaway from this?
Well, all I was going to say is it's a long list. It's a lot. It's a lot to dig into right away. You and I have not even talked about this beforehand. So, the first thing I'll say, I want to say something positive. I think the single best thing in here, and you may disagree, and that's fine, is Chrystia Freeland being pulled from Foreign Affairs. Not that she's being pulled from Foreign Affairs, but that she's being made the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, because that is much more important right now. Chrystia Freeland is a Toronto area MP, but she's originally from Alberta. And if you don't have any MPs from Alberta or Saskatchewan, people with roots there are at least the next best thing. And I think it's fair to say that Chrystia Freeland is pretty well respected and regarded as maybe the strongest link in that whole cabinet. So, I mean, if this is a good sign, and having someone capable there. She's also the Deputy Prime Minister. This is the first Deputy Prime Minister in a long time. There was not a Deputy Prime Minister during the entire Stephen Harper years. They never had one. And in fact, the last Deputy Prime Minister was Anne McClellan under Paul Martin. I think I'd have to go back and count, but I think I saw something like she's only the 10th Deputy PM in Canadian history.
Ooh, wow, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about that. Like Maclean, it could be intergovernmental affairs if she doesn't do it right. Could very quickly become foreign affairs again if she strikes and wrecks it. So
that's a good line. I shouldn't have walked right into that.
It could happen. It could happen. Look, here's what I took away from this. Remember when Joy McPhail called them boy ministries and girl ministries about 20 years ago? And like the boy ministries were finance and resources, and the girl ministries were education and welfare and like all that. Well, we have, despite his pretend credentials as a feminist, we have Justin Trudeau with a very boy-girl cabinet. So, the boy ministries, other than Chrystia Freeland, all of the boy ministries went to boys. Bill Morneau, Minister of Finance. You still have Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defense. Seamus O'Regan, Minister of Natural Resources. Garneau, Transportation. Like all that. Whereas the females, and look, he lost two of his highest profile female cabinet ministers in Jane Philpott and Jody Wilson-Raybould.
That's right.
The kind of the holy trinity of those three was with Chrystia Freeland. That has changed, but Melanie Joly, economic development, official languages, that's kind of thing. Bardish Chagger gets demoted to Minister of Diversity and Inclusion and Youth, and then who is this? There's a minister of, what was the bizarre thing? It was called Middle Class Equality or something. Middle Class Prosperity. I'm trying to find it on my list.
I think it was Middle Class Prosperity. I'm reading this on my phone because
Mona Fortier.
Who I admit I had not heard of before. Hearing that she's a minister.
Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. Like, what is that? That to me is a bit.
What is? I mean,
you also have a minister.
I wanted to bring up that file.
Yeah.
Because I genuinely don't understand what her responsibilities would be, even just conceptually. I mean, is she going to have responsibility for taxes on what the government deems middle class? Is she going to? I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, that's not what is she going to do?
I don't know. Well, she's an associate minister of finance as well. So is Morneau basically training his replacement? Or is it just like we want someone sitting here who's seeing it through a middle class lens? Like middle class voters.
Did they realize that they had one more they had an odd number of cabinet portfolios and one extra.
And they need one
man
more. They want to need one more woman in order to balance
to
it.
even it out. I mean, that's the cynical take, but I don't, of all these ministries, and there are a few that are kind of like, well.
Joyce Miller.
This is the one
Joyce
I
Murray.
genuinely, I don't understand what they will do.
Joyce Murray becomes Minister of Digital Government.
That's the other one that I find, I suspect this is modernization. It's, I guess.
I don't, that's a digital government. That's weird. Then you have a Minister of Indigenous Services and a Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Yes.
Huh? Like, these are the things that you're kind of going, wait, what? So, typical gobbledygook from Trudeau's office where they're too cute by half.
We should look at the BC ministers too.
Yeah, there's four.
While we're doing
four,
this. The big one, obviously, Jonathan Wilkinson is now the Minister of Environment and Climate Change.
Which brings up an interesting point, a demotion for Catherine McKenna.
Yes.
From high profile. Look, climate change is much more important to these Liberals than infrastructure and communities. She's been demoted there. She would be kind of the fourth probably prominent female who were sworn in because it's 2015. She gets knocked down. But I count 4 BC ministers: Joyce Murray, Minister of Digital Government; Carla Qualtrough, Minister of Employment, Workforce Development, and Disability Inclusion. Again, another kind of, frankly, girl portfolio if you're a Joy McPhailism. Harjit Sajjan, Minister of National Defense, and Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Environment and Climate
That's
Change.
right.
So
it obviously made sense to keep Sajjan in National Defense, but four from BC.
Did it make sense?
Well, for his
veterans
background,
don't like him.
That's true. That's a fair point. That's a fair point.
Lawrence Macaulay remains Minister of Veteran Affairs. So basically, he's saying to our armed forces, "No, suck it up."
Yeah. Here's the one that I think is going to get the most, make the most news. Not news, but it will be discussed the most. New Minister of Natural Resources, Seamus O'Regan.
Yes. Well, and here's what I love. So CBC, in trying to explain this, said, well, Seamus O'Regan is an MP from Newfoundland, which is an oil-producing province. Okay. Wow. Stretch. Now Naheed Nenshi, God bless him, tweets a picture this morning of him in Ottawa, like saying, "Oh, beautiful day for a walk up Sussex," and it's like this snowy Ottawa street, and I'm like, "Oh my God, they're going to do it. They're going to put Nenshi in it, and this is going to be like Alberta's going to explode because, Nenshi may be mayor of Calgary, but he's not loved or, and certainly not by the energy industry. So he dodges that bullet. Trudeau doesn't do that, but wow, like Seamus O'Regan." Newfoundland oil producing, like, wow.
And here's the thing with Seamus O'Regan. He's a former CTV talk show host. I think it's fair to say he was not one of the star performers in the previous cabinet. Sir. And this is the kind of thing that got brought up on a few occasions with. I remember Christy Clark having hires criticized because they were friends of hers. There's a well-publicized photo of Seamus O'Regan in Justin Trudeau's wedding party. So these are fair questions to ask. And what is now going to be, I would argue, now more than ever, this ministry has never been more important. And I don't know that would have been my call.
Yeah, exactly. Who would you have put there?
Well, that's a fantastic question. I don't think I do agree with what Trudeau has done in terms of not bringing somebody who wasn't elected into cabinet. Yeah. And I've never understood that argument, to be perfectly honest. I mean, if you're an Albertan, and I'm from Alberta, and you're upset that you don't have representation in this cabinet, you had representation in the previous cabinet, and you were furious. Mm-hmm. So, what difference does it make? Of the available people, if you can't have Chrystia Freeland, and you probably can't, because I agree with where they put her.
Do you move Morneau over there?
That's actually exactly what I was going to suggest. Although I think he probably made it clear that he wants to stay in finance. Yeah. I don't think Jonathan Wilkinson would have been a terrible choice.
Right. The pipeline does run here. You could have taken a British Columbian.
Yeah.
I mean, Carla Qualtrough actually has I think is one of his more talented and underused cabinet ministers.
I completely agree with you there. That actually would have been another good choice. I think she's an underrated diplomat,
Yeah.
which will be important in the months and years to come. So yeah, there were options, and I mean we don't know the other considerations that go into this, and including a few of them who may have just flat out rejected the idea. We
Yeah.
mentioned Bill Morneau, but yeah, we'll
Yeah.
see. I hope Minister O'Regan surprises us, but it is not where I would have gone.
Don't hold your breath. Don't hold your breath.
I tend not to, but
Yeah.
I think that there are. I mean, I'm looking at this list, and there are a few names that I just don't know very well.
Yeah.
But
Really, you're not an expert on Jean-Yves Duclos, president of the Treasury Board?
well, he's one I did recognize. But
yeah.
I mean, the new Minister of Foreign Affairs, for example,
Francois Philippe Champagne. Sounds like a good time.
But I don't know him. And neither did I know the new Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. I admit I had not heard of her before, and I'm confessing my own ignorance here. I knew she's a new MP, but I had simply not heard the name before this morning.
We should throw out one more name out there. David Lametti remains as Minister of Justice and Attorney General, minister responsible for letting SNC out of jail. So that will continue on. So there you go. I look forward to the shadow cabinet where, I hope they put Michelle Rempel or another really hard-edged critic into energy just to see, let's see what this Seamus O'Regan has. We'll see.
What was he before? Was he Indigenous Affairs or whatever? They called it something else, but
I don't know.
I think he was. I think he was one of the ones that they flipped halfway through their term.
Right. When what's his name resigned, when Scott Bryson left, they moved him around.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's right. It was all his fault, really. Scott Bryce's fault. Okay, sorry, that's an old thing. Before we get to the labor thing, let's have a quick Grey Cup prediction from you, Maclean. Winnipeg versus Hamilton, two long-suffering CFL franchises. One of them
the two longest suffering.
I know. One of them is going to get off the schneid, get out of the sad club. Who you got?
Man, the Westerner in me wants to say Winnipeg, and the Stamps fan in me wants to say Winnipeg because it's better to lose to the champ. But Hamilton's good. I think they're just a better team. The game can go either way, but if I have to pick one, I think it's going to be Hamilton.
All right. Well, I'm going to pick Winnipeg. So should we put a little something on the line?
Let's do it. What do you have in mind?
Let's see. I'm coming over for budget in February. How about lunch?
You got it.
Done deal. And not lunch like the government feeds me lunch because I'm in budget lockup. Like a separate meal or coffee or something.
Yes.
Okay.
So that is what you'll be buying me.
That's
February.
right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, served with a blue Hamilton Tiger Cat umbrella.
Oh, okay. Now I see. I was going to say I was looking forward to a game where I have no rooting interest, but now I do.
Right. We'll make it a drink because you know me. I don't like to be in Victoria longer than I have to. So
you got it. A drink it is.
The local cesspool. We'll go there and drink it and then get out. Okay. CBA's. Oh, Maclean. Yes. Yesterday was a great day for construction. The great folks at CLAC, the progressive union that representing thousands of construction workers in this province, they went to Victoria with about 100 of their representatives, some from ICBA companies, some from Progressive Contracts Association companies. Doesn't really matter. The bottom line is they represent part of that 85% of construction workers who are not unionized by the building trades unions that love John Horgan so much and received a sweetheart deal from him. They also represent, along with us, 82% of the apprentices in this province. Again, far more, 4 to 1 more than what the other side has in their building trades unions. They were there. John Horgan gets called on the carpet for remarks he made to one of his union speeches just before becoming premier. The turkeys were flying. John Horgan didn't really apologize. And
didn't apologize at all.
Didn't apologize at all. Certainly, I don't think he claimed that he had lots of respect for those folks. Didn't really act like he had any respect for those folks, and didn't have enough respect to let them actually bid on government-funded projects. So, you were there. I've got it all secondhand from folks who were there. It sounded like it was a pretty positive day for the CLAC folks and in construction in general. But what did you take away from it?
Well, it was hard not to compare it to the event a couple weeks ago when the farmers were here.
Yeah.
Similarly, sort of a group that was upset with the government. And as you may recall, when they called that minister out on the carpet, a couple farmers got up and left and called Lana Popham a liar. That obviously did not happen. All the Clack people and places like Canada Works, they were completely respectful. That said, I mean, you could hear sighs and snickers and all that during some of the questions and answers, which is not unusual. Look, these are tougher questions for the governments to answer when it's very easy for a government to say, the thing you just said is not true.
Yeah.
When it's much more difficult when they are, literally reading statements and questions from people who are physically present, saying, I don't understand why the union that I have chosen that pays my benefits and takes care of my family, and quite frankly, I'm happy to be part of, why you're telling me it's not good enough. Those are more difficult questions to answer, and I think they did a pretty good job. You mentioned Horgan at the end. They challenged him. It was actually a really good question. Mike DeYoung got up and said, okay, let's actually shelve the CBA issue aside for 1 minute. We disagree. That's fine. Can you at least apologize for calling them turkeys? Because that was clearly uncalled for. Horgan got up and actually addressed the gallery, which is almost unheard of, and I thought he was going to do it. I thought he was going to say, I shouldn't have said that. We disagree on this issue, but I shouldn't have said that. And he kind of got that ball rolling and then said, well, no, it was actually about Phil Hochstein, who had been appointed to the Turkey Marketing Board, which I didn't know existed until then. And so it was a reference to that. If you go back and look at the quote, and I tweeted it out yesterday, that is not what he said.
No. I have the video. We've had the video for years here at ICBA. Obviously, Phil Hochstein, 30-year president of ICBA. And look, we're no fans of John Horgan. And frankly, his policies are a bunch of turkeys anyways. But, like Hochstein, we've made Hochstein is one thing. But in his comments to the operating engineers, he very clearly calls them the turkeys at Clack.
Yeah.
Non-union turkeys. Does he call Phil Hochstein a turkey? Yeah. Does that make it better? No.
No.
What are you talking about? And, the funny thing is, ICBA, Phil Hochstein's organization, we fought long and hard to keep Site C going. John Horgan flip-flopped on Site C and allowed it to continue. That is almost completely a Clack work site. The turkeys at Clack are building Site C, which will be one of his lasting legacies as a premier. These things happen, right? Like, all you had to do was say, you know what, I overspoke. I was union rhetoric. Can you blame me? I was in opposition. We were, I was fired up. Like, it would have been fine. But instead, he tries to deflect it onto Hochstein. But all of those guys sitting there had seen the video, have read the, quotes. They're not, they didn't just fall off the excavator. They actually, were there because they've done their homework. They're shop stewards. They're, key people within the Clack union. So they all knew. And I think, for Horgan, it was a major misstep. And look at the coverage today. Palmer, Les Lane, Tom Fletcher. That pretty much touches, every British Columbian has an opportunity to read their work. And, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands do. Very clearly, the turkey thing resonated, and they did not like Horgan's performance on that.
No, and I was speaking with somebody in the NDP who I won't name because I don't want to get them in trouble. But shortly after this, and we were talking about this exact issue and that question, and they agreed that they thought Horgan was actually going to apologize, and that would have been a good idea, and that Horgan would have phrased it in such a way that would have been conciliatory while also clearly expressing a strong policy disagreement, which is fine.
Yeah.
And I said, I think you were right, and I think it would have been well received if he had, but he didn't. And what's worse is it was kind of a weak explanation.
Yeah.
It's just not what he said.
Here's what I think. Number one, I don't think he remembers, or he remembers vaguely calling Hochstein a turkey, but he doesn't remember his speech. He probably hasn't looked back at it. It hasn't been sitting on his desktop like it has here in a Clack. And,
that's probably fair.
He's never looked at it. So first of all, kudos, and in the QPs you'll see this. Question of the week goes to Mike DeYoung for actually referencing this issue. The funny thing is, Clack and us had talked about what they were going to do over there, and this never really came up as like a possibility. But whoever decided that was a tack the Liberals should take, well done. That was smart. it follows up, I think the day before, Horgan had talked about, well, WAC Bennett used CBAs, which of course, as the Orca.ca readers know, Brad Bennett, grandson of WAC Bennett, very compelling piece saying, yeah, Grandpa may have had to, but he would not have ever done it like John Horgan did it, and he had no other choice because there were only unions back then, and now 85% of the workforce isn't unionized. So that falls flat. If this is such a great program, why isn't St. Paul's Hospital, the Royal Columbian expansion, Burnaby Hospital, Penticton Hospital, why aren't they all union-only monopolies? Well, it's because Adrian Dix knows that would run them hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars over budget, and they would have to cut their building down by 30%. So they can't do that. It's all these little kind of things where it all comes back to like, okay, we couldn't get you secret ballots, so we're going to give you Tom Sigerson, this union-only monopoly on a few of these projects in order to kind of to shut you up or to keep you on board. I would also point out that the NDP had a retort pointing out to 7 union-only agreements that the BC Liberals signed. Mm-hmm. That, frankly, was true. However, at the time, Christy Clark was trying to pull the building trades unions into their little family. Clearly, that didn't work. Clearly, the lesson for BC Liberals going forward from that experience is it will never work. When you let the scorpion into your tent, guess what a scorpion does? Stings you. And you can rest assured that, I was at BC Liberal Convention a year ago, and the membership voted 99.9%. It was 100% essentially against these kind of deals in the future. You can bet that'll be part of their platform going forward.
Absolutely.
So, and the scorpion will not sting again.
You mentioned the cost overruns. That was Vaughn Palmer's point in his piece this morning that I thought was a good one, is that for the average British Columbian who doesn't want to get into the weeds on, which group is a union, which one isn't, where they're going to lose public support is in cost overruns. It was one thing, and this is not how Vaughn phrased it, I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but it was one thing to have a couple $100 million cost overrun on a project when you had a $2.7 billion surplus. Now that the surplus is down to, I think it's 179 million as of last month or so, an overrun of $200 million is suddenly, it's just, you can't have it. Yeah. And so you're right, not all projects have CBAs. And that was, that was one of the questions that got asked, I think it was Paul DeYoung in the event yesterday. Is that if this is so great, then how come we're not doing them across the board? Exactly. How come you're picking and choosing? If these are such a cure-all, if you're building BC, then build it, do it, walk the walk. But they literally can't afford to.
Yeah, and let me just walk through for everyone watching, like what happens on a CBA, because it sounds like weird. Here's what happens: any company can bid on that project, but but essentially what happens is you bid on the project, and let's say you get the contract, you immediately have to fire your employees. You take them off your benefit plan, you lay them off, and then they go and apply for a job with the BC Infrastructure Benefits, which is a Crown corporation run by the unions. They go apply for a job there, construction job there. They get hired by that group. Then that group assigns workers to you. So, you show up on your first day of work as the foreman, and you're like, okay, I need 8 excavator drivers and 7 of these guys and 12 of these guys. And the union determines who goes out. And of course, you're not getting your workers. You'll get a few of them probably back, but by and large, you're getting strangers to come and work on your site who are unfamiliar with their safety procedures, who are unfamiliar with your teamwork, who are unfamiliar with your process, how you do business, and that ends up costing a lot more money. The bureaucracy costs a lot more money. The fact that fewer companies are bidding is costing more money, and all of this kind of comes together in this mess. And what happened on the Island Highway is guys were gaming the system as best they could, trying to make it work. So, for example, you'd have there was the union dispatcher's son was on the list and constantly getting sent out to stuff. He sucked. So what happened was, they basically paid him to stay at home. A company put him on the payroll to stay at home for 2 years so that they could get a better worker in his place. This is not what you want for taxpayer-funded projects. This is cronyism, craziness. It's unworkable. So, and again, you're cutting out 85% of the workers who aren't unionized and 82% of the apprentices who aren't unionized, all in the guise of encouraging more workers and more apprentices. So. It's definitely problematic. Oh, and by the way, at the end of that project, those people who've been paying their union dues and union benefits and into a union retirement fund leave and come back to your company. quit BCIB, come back to your company to work on other projects, and guess what? They can't take their pension contributions or any of that money they sent to the union bosses with them.
So in other words, you're taking people that have, vested interests and benefits and pension contributions, and you're sort of temporarily making them freelancers.
Yeah, and even worse, like Lower Mainland Steel, Norm Strew is the CEO, written for the Orca, great pieces on this.
That's true.
They're not unionized, but they have an employee association which participates in profit sharing. Well, now they don't. If they actually got one of these projects, and he said they're not bidding on them, and good for them, good on them for standing by their principles, they would have to lay those workers off. Those workers are no longer eligible for their profit sharing. Also, they can go and work for this nebulous government agency. So it's really big brothery. It's bad policy. It's bad for taxpayers. It's terrible for construction workers. And that's why we and Clack and a bunch of other folks are in court trying to fight it.
Which goes to court next year, I believe.
Yeah, so I think February was the last we heard. Not surprisingly, David Eby's office is dragging their heels as much as possible on this. Interestingly, Maclean, we should go back and look, because weren't there supposed to be announcements about Patello Bridge by now?
Yes, you're right.
So we should go back and actually pull those and see what they said for a timeline, because I thought it was by end of 2019 we'd see something. But here we are, there's only 6 weeks left, so...
There'll be a few announcements that come after the end of session when there's a little less scrutiny and everyone's a little more, there's usually a Christmas news dump, and there'll be a few of those then, I'm sure.
Yes. All right. Victoria City Council. Maclean.
Oh my God.
Why don't you want to pay these hardworking representatives more money? They're just trying to they have to sit through public hearings, and they need more money.
The person who put this best is our friend Rob Shaw, and I mean that Rob is a friend, who said, the worst part about all this is not even that they did it. It's that you mentioned Councilman Ben Isett. He introduced this motion, and then afterwards refuses to address the media or comment on it because he knows it's indefensible. Because he's a part-time counselor and doesn't have time to devote to the media. So if only we would give him his 50% raise, he would have time to speak to the media. How in the world this council can certain members of this council can contemplate asking for a 50% pay hike when they are underfunding the police to the point where things like patrols are happening with less frequency in Victoria is just, it's incomprehensible. And even the provincial NDP are horrified. Mike Farnworth's comments publicly were harsh enough. Some of the comments some of them have made privately are much worse. So when you've got a council that even has a left-wing council that even has the NDP shaking their heads and saying, you guys are terrible, you've gone too far.
Yeah. Look, on the issue of pay raises, I was a municipal councillor for 2 terms in the township of Langley. We had to deal with municipal pay raises. It is the worst. However, kind of what we would do is any raise that came in, we would set for the next council.
Yes.
Because you shouldn't be voting on your own pay raises. It was weird. And look, no one holds a gun to Ben Isett's head and says you have to run for office, and do this. You choose to do it. So you can pay, so if there's going to be pay, you know at election time what the contract is, right? If I win, the contract is X. So you deal with it. Mm-hmm. Here's what I would say. Guys, being on council is not a competitive job market, in the sense that you can't cross the street to Langford and say, well, Langford pays their councillors 1.8 times more than ours. I'm going to run in Langford. More power to you if you're courageous enough to go over there and run somewhere else for more money. More power to you. I'm all for that. Let's see it, because I cannot wait for that community to wipe you out of the polls. However, there is no competitive market for these municipal councillors. It's not like you can go run somewhere else and be like, wow, school board pays, it's XYZ dollars, I can run for. No, there's no competitive market for municipal politicians. Further, there's a study done by a Calgary politician about 15 years ago, who looked at this myth that you need to pay more to attract better people. And what he found was that generally people were more satisfied with their representatives when the representatives were making nothing than when they were making a lot of money.
Really? I've not seen this one.
He looked at the U.S., he went through the U.S. and looked at places where they pay their legislators a lot and where they pay them a little and where they don't pay them at all. And he found generally people were happier with the service they were getting from the freebies, right? Now, on Ben Isett. Mm-hmm. Other than Brad West, There is no bigger media, plug your ears kids, whore in the province on any municipal council than Ben Isett. So for him to go and disappear from the media in some sort of object lesson like, oh, I can't talk to you because I'm so busy on other things, because you don't pay me enough money, is the most ridiculous shirking of responsibility. And Victoria voters, you should be ashamed of yourselves for electing this guy in the first place and re-electing him again. Look, like, Rob Fleming was a Victoria City Councillor, correct?
I believe so.
I think there was this myth that Ben Isett was like Rob Fleming, a little bit like Rob Fleming light. He would be kind of like that natural placement as a lefty guy. No. Ben Isett is a terrible councillor who should be de-elected immediately. And if you want municipal recall, if it's the Port Moody mayor that you want to recall or whoever you want to recall, I'm all on board for municipal recall just to see guys like Ben Isett get bounced, because this is a guy who, let's not forget, last year tried to cancel Remembrance Day, which
yes, and Canada Day.
And Canada Day, in order, because policing was so expensive, and what a terrible thing. We shouldn't be honoring military, the military, violence and force and all that stuff. It's unfathomable to me that this guy is an elected official, and I think it just contributes to the very low opinion most news viewers, news watchers, and pundits have of Victoria in general.
And if you set aside the politics, which is not easy to do, and I will give you that, but the thing that drives me crazy about this is this sort of sneaky backdoor way they're doing it, is that they're setting up a study to see what the budgetary impacts would be. Look, if you believe that Victoria needs a full-time council and that councillors will perform better if you pay them more, then make the case.
Right.
I am prepared to listen. I am. But what they're doing now is just so clearly I think I can get away with this. That's what infuriates me.
Yeah. I'll give you other things. So some communities set blue ribbon panels, but the blue ribbon panel, Maclean will always be like the head of the Chamber of Commerce who's cozy with all the councillors, and the president of the university who makes $280,000 a year. And it's never the single mom. It's never the person who makes whatever the average amount of income is. Like, if you're going to do a panel, I tell you what, here's what you do. You figure out what the average annual income is in your community, and you make sure the panel reflects that average annual income. You have a single mom, you have someone making $100,000. Fine, okay, great. But it's got to reflect the annual average income, and let them decide what you should be paid. Yeah. But of course, council will never do that, because they know exactly the answer they get, which is it's not really hard to go to meetings and sit for 6 hours, or to read a little bit, or to go to community events. That's just job number one. And number two, no one's forcing you to do it. If you don't like it, don't run.
To put it another way, if you had a choice between trial by judge, who is your neighbor and friend, or trial by jury, which one would you pick?
Yeah, well, exactly. So, anyways, municipal pay, of all the things Victoria had, like of all the issues in Victoria. I was there for last weekend for kids hockey tournament. It was great, but there's a lot of issues in Victoria. There's a lot.
No question. No question.
I was shocked at the amount of homelessness within the Victoria core. I was shocked at the number of vacant stores. There's some great, like, thriving hip businesses that are much too cool for me to enter, but they're there and they're doing stuff. But then there's all of these like empty spots. Like, it was pretty shocking.
It's true.
Transportation. We talk about the transit strike here. The Colwood crawl, the transportation to get into the city. The fact, there's a lot going on, and I just wonder, like, of all the issues, like, solve all those issues, then come and ask us for a raise.
Well, and you mentioned them: homelessness, the opioid epidemic, businesses closing, sky-high property business property taxes, even things like where they're putting bike lanes. So all these are issues that get talked about every day here in Victoria. I don't see how any one of them is improved by paying council more. At least I don't see the case for that. Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Okay. We will be back next week on the 27th, assuming that Vancouver is not burning in a horrible transit strike. And we'll see how that goes. But I plan to be here. In fact, although we may move it to Tuesday just to be safe, because you just never know what could happen.
We can make that work.
Yikes. And then next week, I think, is last week of session, and then you're off until session's off till February.
Yes, that'll be wow. It'll be odd. Be back and quiet here.
Was there any raised eyebrows in the press gallery today on Bob Mackin tweeting, the 1-year anniversary of the Perp Walk and stuff like that?
No, actually, I didn't even realize that this was the 1-year anniversary, and I missed that tweet. The gallery is occupied at an event on the lawn, which actually is happening as we record, and so I have not heard any reaction to that at all. First I'm hearing of it.
You got the Hammer Mackin and his well-placed sources in the Speaker's office. Allegedly. All right. That's it for us. Follow us, at the Orchid BC on Twitter, facebook.com/theorchidbc. I'm at Jordan Bateman. He's at Maclean K. And he'll be cheering for the Tiger Cats, which is a terrible bet. And we will see you all next week.
See you next week.